You're going to love these Karen stories today, especially our title story. Here's the first one. This one dates back a while to 2017, but I've been wanting to share it ever since, so apologies if it's a bit long. Background. I was in my third year of an accounting job that I absolutely hated, but I also hated the industry as a whole and was essentially using the position to bide my time as I learned a new skill to eventually jump to an entirely new career. My boss at the time, who I'll call Tia, was the shining example of this specific flavor of toxicity that I'd found sinking its teeth into most of the accounting departments that I've worked in. Imagine the power trip of middle management plus the prestige of managing multi-million-dollar transactions. She was the first accountant for the company when it started and had become the de facto choice for new highest position in the department every time the company's growth called for a departmental restructuring. The only thing I could determine was earning her these positions was her confidence and conviction in the way she determined things needed to be done, which C-suite just ate right up, even paying for her to get whatever training or certification she needed to qualify for the new roles presented to her. In the meantime, she'd given me 3 consecutive annual reviews, scoring a solid 0% satisfaction rate each time, which was always enough to justify a 0% raise, but never enough to justify actually letting me go and putting me out of my misery. So at this point, I was fully checked out, especially after finding out that I'd become the lowest paid employee out of around 100, including interns and the front desk clerk. In the latest restructuring, Tia was not promoted to the new CFO role as the board wanted real experience, but was given a controller role while a new level of management was added between us. HR had also become its own department, no longer falling under accounting's purview. Tia didn't seem to like simultaneously becoming second in accounting's command while also losing control of HR. She convinced the company to send her to law school so she could eventually transition into some kind of Frankenstein-esque accounting and legal and HR position that would oversee essentially everything the company did outside of actual production. This required her to leave the office around 2 to 3 p.m. every afternoon to attend classes, making her unreachable until the evenings. The new management position that opened between us saw 3 to 4 employees join and leave for greener pastures over the course of a year and a half, but this story takes place while I was under the only manager I actually liked, who I'll call Kevin. I could see him doing what he could to advocate for me while still being forced by Tia to treat me the way she had previously treated me, and I could tell it made him feel awkward handing these decisions down my way. I respected his attempts to work with us, and he actually helped us create a functional and efficient department for a few glorious but short-lived months. Story. Suddenly, a bill was passed in the US stating that salaried employees making less than $40,000 a year would be eligible for overtime pay, taking effect later in the year. After 3 years of no raises, I was sitting at around $37,500 a year, making me eligible for the eventual overtime. Working in accounting, it's pretty much expected that you'll be working 50 to 60 hours a week, especially when closing out the monthly and quarterly and annual financials. However, after being shafted for so long and still being stuck with crap work that had little effect on the actual financials, I was actively giving them as close to 40 hours a week as possible, only staying behind if we'd gotten an important request towards the end of the day that Kevin begged me to take care of before leaving. I knew it would look a bit off if I suddenly started working a bunch of overtime after this change took place, so I planned on very slowly ramping up my hours over the preceding months to eventually take advantage of the extra pay. After 1 or 2 months, I was regularly putting in 45 to 55 hours a week, with most extra hours spent remoting into my home computer to practice programming, and looking forward to the income this new workflow would provide me. I guess they eventually caught on as Kevin pulled me into a conference room and presented me with a contract to sign stating that I wasn't to work any overtime without Tia's approval. For reasons that you'll see below, I quickly recognized this as a way to never have to work an extra hour for the rest of my tenure at the company. I signed it and immediately cut out all overtime, leaving at 4 p.m. that day, as I'd work through lunch. The next day, I stopped showing up early, started taking actual lunches, and could be heard peeling out of the lot at 5:01 every day. Kevin noticed my sudden lack of hours and tried to mention the contract not being in effect until the bill kicked in. I reminded him that we had a signed contract that failed to list a start or end date, so I considered it fully in effect. I could see the "oh crap" realization hit, but he begrudgingly accepted the loss. Now, I'll mention again that he was great, and this action had obviously come from Tia, and he was now stuck dealing with the repercussions the same as I was, so he didn't really fight me too hard on it. Later that week, an important client request came in at around 4:45. He asked if I could stay behind to work on it, and I asked if he had Tia's approval. This was his second "ah crap" moment, as unfortunately, due to her classes, Tia had become unreachable between 2 and 8 p.m. every weekday for the foreseeable future, and he didn't usually know he'd need extra work from me until after 4. Everything went exactly to plan as I got to enjoy a comfortable 40-hour week, throwing the contract back at them anytime they tried to squeeze even an extra minute out of my time. Now for the real kicker. Before the new bill took effect, a judge blocked it and shut it down entirely, meaning no more overtime pay for salaried employees. A crippling loss for the workforce, but I at least still got to enjoy my new schedule. Management tried to claw back my hours, but hey, I still have a contract that says I can't. Sorry guys. I was finally pulled into Tia's office, who tried to explain the lack of necessity for the overtime approval now that the overtime bill wouldn't be coming into play. I again reminded her that we had a signed contract with no dates and no mention of this being in relation to the impending overtime law. Then came my favorite part of the conversation. She said, "So yes, this is still a valid contract, but I want to be clear that it doesn't override your original employment contract here with us." And I said, "Oh, you mean the employment contract that states 40 hours a week?" And that was that. I was eventually let go a few months later after replying, "because I don't," when a CFO mentioned people saying I look like I don't care about my job, but I'd finally built up my skills enough to find a position in my new industry while still enjoying my severance, so I consider it a win. 4 years later, I'm doing work that I enjoy from home, hanging out with my dogs with a calmer mind and a fatter wallet, all while they're still stressing over someone else's money. This happened around 2013 or so. I had a part-time gig as event staff for a local university. I really enjoyed it because it brought in extra cash, broke up the monotony of my full-time retail job, I could request game days off well in advance, and it was a sign-up per gig, so I didn't have to work if I didn't want to. The city this university is in was not designed to handle the massive crowds that attend college football games nowadays. It's a super old city, like Victorian houses are everywhere, so traffic is a nightmare anywhere near it. Most people opt for shuttle buses or pay like $20 for game day parking at businesses and even people's driveways. But for those that have season tickets, they get special assigned parking areas on campus. On regular days, these areas are free for students and guests to use, but if you're in those areas on game day, your vehicle will be towed at your expense. So game day rolls around and I'm in charge of Lot D. Only tow trucks and anyone that has a D hanging from their rear view mirror gets in. A movable plastic barricade was the gateway. As always, traffic on campus becomes bumper to bumper as fans inch their way to their assigned lots. So slow, in fact, that I can easily help point people in the right direction if they're lost. I kept a notepad and a map with me so I could jot down left, straight left, right for them without ever leaving my post. So everything is going smoothly. People are frazzled by the traffic, but very polite when talking to me throughout the day. I had just let in a vehicle and was moving the barricade back in place when a new, very ritzy white SUV whips in, preventing me from fully closing the entrance. I immediately noticed that their mirror sign thingy did not say D, but instead said Brad Pad. I walk to the driver's side window and see a young college-aged man with an "I'm so done with this crap" look on his face. In the back middle seat was his very annoyed father, and the passenger seat was occupied by his very ticked-off looking mother. I say, "Hi, y'all folks need some help?" Dad says, "Yeah, we can park right here, right?" I say, "I'm afraid not, sir. This is for D vehicles only, and your pass says Brad Pad." Dad says, "But our pass is blue, and this lot is blue on the map." Quick note about the map: parking areas were colored to make it easier to visually separate one lot from another, as the same colors never touched. There was like 3 blues, 3 orange, 2 yellow, and so on, but they had nothing to do with the parking areas at all. So I say, "Oh, the colors don't matter, sir. The only thing that matters is the letters, and I can't let you in without a D or your vehicle will be towed." Mom says, "Then where the heck are we supposed to park?" Son says, "Mom, calm down." And I say, "That's a very good question because you're the first Brad Pad I've seen. So let's see." I begin scanning the map. Dad jumps in, "This is freaking ridiculous." Son says, "Dad, he's just trying to help us." There is nothing on the map that says Brad Pad, but the basketball stadium is named Bradford So-and-so Stadium and indeed has an assigned parking area around it. No letter, just gray parking area. So I make an educated guess that that's where they are to park. Problem is, it's on the other side of campus in the opposite direction they came from. I say, "I believe you guys are supposed to be at the basketball stadium back that way. I'm not 100% sure, but that's your best bet." The son rested his head on the steering wheel in utter exasperation as the dad said, "The basketball stadium's in gray and our pass is blue." My reply, "Sir, the colors do not matter. I have no idea why the university thought colors were a good idea, but all that matters is what your pass says, not what color it is." The mom, screaming at me, shouts, "No, our pass is blue and that means we can park anywhere that's blue, so let us in now because you are wrong." The son snaps his head up and looks at his mom. "Mom, shut the heck up." She didn't acknowledge her son's outburst and just kept staring at me with a glare that could melt porcelain. I have dealt with rude customers before, but never been yelled at like that before. I was stunned. After about 5 seconds that felt like an eternity, the words just flowed out of me. Okay, just go on in." I said this in a very "okay, but you'll be sorry" tone. Mom says, "See, that's better." Now, what I meant to do was watch where they parked so I could wave over the son and tell him to get his parents into the stadium and come back to move the SUV because none of this was his fault at all. Poor guy just wanted to enjoy a nice game of football with his loved ones. However, at that moment, people that actually belonged in Lot D started arriving in rapid succession, and I had a job to do. I also didn't see where they parked. Sure enough, about 45 minutes later, a guy in a university golf cart pulls into the lot and starts walking around cars. 30 minutes after that, 3 tow trucks come rolling in, each with different company names on them. 2 student cars were removed, as well as a new ritzy white SUV. I watched as they towed it down the street, Brad Pad sign dangling from the rearview mirror. About 30 minutes after the game started, the barricade was taken down and I was picked up by an event staff truck so we could start picking up traffic cones, so I never got to see the unfettered rage those people had to be in when the game was over. Also, the university does not keep track of what company tows what vehicle, so I'm sure that was even more fuel for the fire. After that day, I found a better job that paid more for 40 hours and paid overtime, so that was my last event staff gig. To the college guy driving that day, if you're reading this, I am very sorry your SUV was towed, but I hope that your parents paid to get it out of hock for you and learned something that day. This is about a decade ago, but still well within the realm of the internet. I was a technical writer for the government and had slowly been transferring our old employee handbook, I think like government bureaucracy from the 1940s, into a modern and actually useful doc. Think one page with our policies and links to useful websites like the Office of Personnel Management, forms for workman's comp, and so on. My boss wanted the whole thing printed out on her desk the next morning. This was Monday of the Thanksgiving weekend. I printed out the 200 or so pages and just had the links to the various websites in bold. This took about an hour and I left it on her desk before going home that night. She calls me in her office on Tuesday afternoon and proceeds to yell at me at how stupid I am. Do I think that people can just go to a website when it's on paper? no, I need to print everything out. I calmly tell her that these sites are pretty dense and deep and it would be about 10,000 pages. She says she does not care, it needs to be on her desk, dang it, first thing Monday morning. Mind you, this is now Tuesday and we usually had some of Wednesday off. I was not really planning to work Thursday, Thanksgiving, or Friday as I had applied for leave and I was looking forward to, well, a nice relaxing long weekend. I don't have family, but I had plans. But okay, whatever. I asked for and I got the request to have everything pertaining to the employee handbook online in a printed format. I also had real work and real deadlines. A quick bit of context. She was my boss and she did my performance appraisals and she could make my life, well, miserable and possibly fire me. However, my clients were teams that put together engineering plans, biological assessments, scientific journal articles, reports to Congress, and so on that had real-world deadlines. On some of these, if you missed the publication date, your agency paid $100,000 a day in delay fees. Or you would tick off a congressperson, which is, well, never a good idea. And I was really getting sick and tired of my boss's requests that took me away from my actual work. So I was printing and printing all the rest of Tuesday afternoon and then Wednesday. I had to go to the site, print, click on the next link, print, and so on. On Wednesday, we got a congressional, which is a letter from a Congress critter that was actually important. Had we not gotten that, I might not have done what I did. I got overtime approved pronto to take care of this request, so I did work Thanksgiving. As I was doing that, I kept on printing and printing. I used up every sheet of paper in our 14-story building. I kept on researching the response for the congressional, printing, going to the next floor to carefully get that packet of paper to tuck under the appropriate page, and so on. I had paper in about 20 different conference rooms. I could have done the congressional in about 8 hours, but it was not due until Monday. And all of this printing took me a good 24 hours of work. So I put in for 32 hours Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I got it done. This is now 2 stacks of paper, each about 6 feet high. I was way under in my estimate of 10,000 pages, as it was more like 30,000. Now remember, I had at least 5 printers going at once for 4 days and such. I put this in my boss's office, which was already none too clean and pristine. I got written up with a disciplinary hearing and everything. The charge was malicious compliance. I kept my job only because I did have her request in an email. Update and explanations. I did not expect this to get more than a few hundred views, so thank you all for reading and being amused. A few explanations from questions in the comments. I kept my job only because, I say that because the boss was very upset and was going to HR demanding that I be put on a performance improvement plan, or a PIP, where she could then take her revenge and create other issues that would have gotten me fired. I was probably not in danger of being fired, simply for this action, but I was not put on a PIP. I was given a disciplinary letter, so the only actual fallout was that I could not get a bonus, which we get $1,000 bonuses if our performance is above average. I would have been okay in an RIF, as this is a mild punishment. Yes, the charge actually and literally was malicious compliance. That was what was written on the disciplinary letter. She could not get me on anything else. She had not set any limits, like you can only spend X hours, you can only print out X amount of materials, blah, blah, blah. And I had her instructions in an email to print out the handbook and all the pertaining information from the websites. I don't remember the exact wording, and I probably should have kept that all these years, but when I left the government after 3 decades, I pretty much threw out everything. The 2 6-foot stacks were not just the paper printouts. See, the handbook covered everything, and it was more of an intranet in itself. Now, I'd been working on this project for a long time in my spare time. See, the handbook, it covered everything. So in short, it was a well-organized intranet where you could quickly find exactly what you needed and no more. I had human resources policies on leave and tardiness, all the disciplinary actions, retirement, health insurance, taxes, transfer requests, and so on. How to write all types of reports like planning reports, facility review reports, congressionals, and so on, along with all the templates for the reports. You got project management, public involvement processes, and so on. Every position description, and how to write performance reviews, award letters, and so on. I mean, there's emergency procedures for particular buildings and so on, how to conduct and write a job hazard analysis for any type of work on the facility. I mean, there was absolutely no reason to print this out. And my boss never gave me a reason. I'd been arguing against printing this for at least a year before my boss gave me the order to even print the 200 pages that I had in the first place. I mean, these 200 pages each briefly explain the situation. So for example, like why we do a job hazard analysis, what it should cover, and who should do one. And then it gave links, so for example, to the Word template that you could download and use, and to some good examples. So I'd already had a lot of material that I just put into piles. So the piles look like, say, an index tab with a sticky for the topic, a sheet of the paper explaining the concept, a ream of the paper printing out the internet with all of the pages with the related links neatly put into a notebook, pre-printed examples of templates, reports, blah blah blah, so on. So we did have a printing unit off-site, so the major jobs were printed there. Thus, we did not have that many copiers in the building, so one per floor. And yes, before you ask, my boss could have asked the copy unit to do the work, but the copy unit would only print things that were already in a pre-approved PDF format. They would not have printed the internet for my boss. Yes, my boss kept her job. She was promoted soon after from being the group manager of about 15 people to being the deputy chief of a division of several hundred people. Yes, I worked at the same job, technical writer, for 30 plus years. First off, I loved what I did. I was good at it. And I never wanted to go into management and deal with people headaches myself. Second off, I needed the health insurance and I wouldn't have been able to get a private company job because of my underlying handicap. So staying put in the government and doing what I loved worked out well for me. And I was quite effective at my job. I wrote documents that allowed decision makers to understand complex issues and make good decisions, employees use and protect our facilities, and so on. My colleagues respected me and we worked well together. Yes, this is the US federal government, and we did have a very ineffectual union where only a few people were allowed to be bargaining unit members, and the union could have done very little to save my job. Karen demands ownership of my property, but I am the owner. See if you would handle this, Karen, like the original poster did. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss out, and I'll see you there.